Hi, everybody. This is the Patriot Hood, the amazing, spectacular, terrific, the great one, the people's champion. Your host, the Hood, and welcome back. And we're going to do a live video here. There's a lot to get through. Want to do this live and see how this goes. It's a lot to go through because obviously there's 60 something years of information that's been hidden. But I found something interesting. I learned about this a while back, and it was shocking to me. To be honest with you. Uh, and we're going to go through this. We'll see how this goes. Uh, it seems that there was a lot of sort of CIA agents running around in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. A lot of them. A lot of famous ones. Uh, Four members of the Watergate break-in were there. And obviously from the title of this video, George H.W. Bush was there too. And I go through this. I have a letter here that was found about 20 years ago. I guess some files were released about 20 years ago in 2005. I found this article, and it's not a very glowing article on George W. Bush, but that's all right. And let me get through this. And this is a lot here. Okay, I'm not going to read the beginning parts of this. This is just a hit piece on W. Because he's another individual we'll get into at some point, especially if they start digging into 9/11. And if you watch my previous video, I'll put the link in the description later on if I remember. Here's the headline. George H.W. Bush links to the Kennedy assassination. I'm going to skip all this. This is just a hit piece on W. But this is very interesting to me. I'm very fascinated with this. And this is a new sort of wrinkle that I didn't know about. And this was put out 20 years ago. Now, please like this video and, of course, subscribe. I'm going to have plenty of stuff on JFK as we get closer to all the sort of revelations that's going to come out in another month. So I was going to do this record it, but I started reading this article. Normally I don't read the articles. Started reading the article, and I realized that this is more than just me reading it. But here we go. What's the article's name? What's the name of this article? George H.W. Bush links to the Kennedy assassination. Okay, let's see. But there is something else about John F. Kennedy in particular that makes the Bushes jumpy. The name George H.W. Bush appears much too frequently in documents, some newly released, related to the assassination of President Kennedy. Although he publicly denies it, George H.W. Bush was working for the CIA as early as 1961. There's so much on Bush, it's unbelievable here, going through this. Many feel he was actually recruited during his college days, which is when he joined the Skull and Bones Society, a front for the Illuminati. Bush claims to have been working for his own oil company during the early 1960s, but makes for a convenient front since the claims to have been offshore on drilling rigs for weeks at a time. The rigs were located over the world. Was he really on the rigs, or was he running around on CIA business? The document trail linking George H.W. Bush to those involved in the assassination of President Kennedy is nothing less than chilling. Now, this is one president that's involved, a former president who became president, that's involved with the Kennedy situation, sort of buzzing around. I'm going to dig into Gerald Ford's role in this too. First is a memo dated November 22nd, 1963, from FBI Special Agent Graham Kitchell to the FBI Special Agent in charge in Houston. The subject is unknown subject, assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the memo states. Here we go. At 1:45 p.m., Mr. George H.W. Bush, president of the Zapata Offshore Drilling Company, Houston, Texas. Now, keep in mind Zapata. There are names. If you saw the Oliver Stone movie, okay, if you saw the Oliver Stone movie, you're going to read a who's who list of all the players in that movie. So just keep that in mind. President of the Zapata Offshore Drilling Company, Houston, Texas. Residence 5525 Briar, Houston. Telephonically furnished the following information to writer by long-distance telephone from Tyler, Texas. Bush stated he wanted to be kept confidential, but wanted to furnish hearsay that he recalled hearing in recent weeks, the day and source unknown. He stated that one James Parrott has been talking of killing the president when he comes to Houston. Now, why does an old man need to care about this? Bush stated that Parrott is possibly a student at the University of Houston and has acted in political matters in the area. He stated that he felt Mrs. Foley, telephone number blah blah blah, or Arlene Smith of the Harris County Republican Party headquarters would be able to furnish additional information regarding the identity of Parrott. Bush stated he was proceeding to Dallas, Texas, would remain in the Sheraton Dallas Hotel, and return to his residence on 11/23/63. Okay, why was he there? Why was he in Dallas? So we have George H.W. Bush telling the FBI that he did not know the source of the information, but knew that a John Bircher named James Parrott, who was the same age as Lee Harvey Oswald, wanted to kill President Kennedy in Houston. Bush did not know much about Parrott, but gave the name of two Republican Party officials in Houston. Of course, Bush's Zapata Offshore Drilling Company has been a CIA front since 1960. Now get this. Again, Zapata. And has supplied the Bay of Pigs invasion. Had supplied it. Code name Zapata. Force with two of his company's ex-U.S. Navy landing craft renamed the Barbara J. I mean, really. This would be so obvious. I mean, what did George Carlin used to call her? They used to call her the Silver Fox. That was her code name. But George Carlin called her the Silver Douchebag. He was right about that. In any case, Bush's phone call to the FBI was a false lead. Parrott was cleared. However, Bush's phone call creates more questions about him than about Parrott. First of all, there is no evidence that Bush was in Tyler when Kennedy was shot. There was no caller ID in those days that would have allowed Special Agent Kitchell to know for a fact that Bush was calling from Tyler. Bush's wife, Barbara, the Silver Douchebag, claimed he was in Tyler, but Bush once said he may have been in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, that day. But Bush himself admits to the FBI that he was booked into the Sheraton Hotel in Dallas on November 22nd. So let me get this straight. His wife says that he's in Haiti on that day, but he says he was booked in the Sheraton Hotel in Dallas on that day. It's odd. Bush always had a keen interest in what files the government had on Kennedy's assassination. When he was CIA director in 1976, Bush wanted to see all the agency's files on the Kennedy assassination. His memo specifically requested information on Oswald Jack Ruby and others linked to the assassination. Now, I would mention Jack Ruby. The word is that he was running the casinos in New Orleans for the Chicago mob. That he wasn't just some low-level nobody, some guy that owned a strip club. He was more than that. And that he had connections to the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. He worked for Lyndon Johnson, and he worked for Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was in Dallas the day before. But as far as I can tell, from what I've read and heard, no connection to the assassination. And others linked to the assassination. In her book, The Family, The Real Story of the Bush Dynasty, author Kitty Kelly writes that years later, when Bush became president of the United States, he would deny making any attempt to review the agency files on the JFK assassination. When he made this claim, he did not realize that the agency released 18 documents under the Freedom of Information Act that showed that he had indeed, as CIA director, requested information not once, but several times on a wide range of questions surrounding the assassination. Then there's the business of the November 29, 1963 memo from the director of the Department of State's Bureau of Investigation and Research to J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director. The subject is assassination of President John F. Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963. The memo states this. Our Miami, Florida office on November 23rd, 1963 advised that the Office of Coordinator of Cuban Affairs in Miami advised that the Department of State feels some misguided anti-Castro group might capitalize on the present situation and undertake an unauthorized raid against Cuba, believing that the assassination of President John F. Kennedy might herald a change in U.S. policy. Our sources and informants familiar with Cuba matters in the Miami area advised that the general feeling in the anti-Castro Cuba community is one of stunned disbelief. And even though among those who did not entirely agree with the president's policy concerning Cuba, the feeling is that the president's death represents a great loss not only to the U.S. but to all of Latin America. This was a belief. I mean, Castro felt that he was the closest thing to peace there. These sources know of no plans for unauthorized action against Cuba. An informant who has furnished reliable information in the past and who's close to a small pro-Castro group in Miami has advised that these individuals are afraid that the assassination may result in strong repressive measures being taken against them, and although pro-Castro and their feelings regret the assassination. The substance of the foregoing information was orally furnished to us, George Bush of the Central Intelligence Agency, and Captain William Edwards of the Defense Intelligence Agency on November 23rd, 1963, by Mr. W.T. Forsyth of this bureau. So they mentioned Bush again. Is that crazy or what? A copy of the above memo was furnished to the Director of Naval Intelligence. This is important for reasons that will be explained in the following paragraph. Not only was George H.W. Bush a known CIA operative in Dallas on November 22nd, but he was also keeping track of the stance of pro-Castronites in Miami. That would have been important because no less than Lee Harvey Oswald, Kennedy's accused assassin, was supposed to be a pro-communist member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. But he was associated, now get this is who they mention. You watch the movie, but he was also associated with the Anti-Communist League of the Caribbean and Friends of Democrat Cuba. And his apparent control officer was FBI agent Guy Bannister, who was played by Tommy Lee Jones. Was located at 544 Camp Street in New Orleans. 544 Camp was also the address used by Oswald's pro-communist Fair Play for Cuba Committee. The local Office of Naval Intelligence was across the street from 554 Camp. Director of Naval Intelligence made privy as an info eddy to the aforementioned State Department's memo on the reaction of pro and anti-Castro Cubans in Miami to Kennedy's death. Oswald was stationed at a classified U-2 base in Japan as a U.S. Marine. Would have had his security clearance adjudicated by the Office of Naval Intelligence. Bush's role as a CIA operative in the Bay of Pigs invasion and military action, which the Office of Naval Intelligence was closely involved, suggested that other links between Bush, ONI, and the anti-Castro Cuban exiles are not benign. Wow. George H.W. Bush has still other more oblique links to the Kennedy assassin. The Houston-based conspirator James Parrott, Guy Bannister was a fervent John Bircher. Bannister was not only associated with Oswald, but also David Ferry. David Ferry in the movie was played by Joe Pesci. The commander of Louisiana Civil Air Patrol Unit, whose members included not only Oswald, but also James Reynolds Beth. The future buddy in Texas Air National Guard pilot George W. Bush. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is crazy. Please, of course, like this video. According to one of Bath's former Houston business associates, Bath became a pilot to the cadet program of the Louisiana Civil Air Patrol, a known recruiting ground for future CIA agents. 6 days before Pearl Harbor, the Civil Air Patrol was founded by Dallas oilman David Harold Byrd, who also owned the Texas School Book Depository from the 30s to 1972. I would mention about David Harold Byrd. He was good friends with Lyndon Johnson. He was his um, main lobbyist. He's the guy that gave him a lot of money, the main donor. Another supporter of the Louisiana Civil Air Patrol was Claire Chennault, the founder of China's Flying Tigers and the notorious civil air transport of China that later became Air America. Air America was this sort of CIA front where they were trafficking drugs. That was a Robert Downey Jr. Mel Gibson movie. So there's some bad actors here. Some bad people here. All in the CIA. Wow. Chinook died in New Orleans' murky intelligence-connected Ochsner Foundation Hospital in 1958. In 1964, Byrd apparently moved the Oswald window pane from the 5th floor of the Texas School Depository and made a souvenir fixture in his home. See? Again, they don't mention here that he was friends with Lyndon Johnson. Why would he do that? Because he was his main donor. Unbelievable. Another connection between Bush and the assassination is George de Mohrenschildt, an anti-communist white Russian emigre, befriended fellow white Russian Marina Oswald and her husband Lee upon their emigration from the Soviet Union to Texas, where Mohrenschildt was involved in the oil business. Mohrenschildt's son-in-law told the Warren Commission that it was likely that his father-in-law was involved with the Kennedy assassination. The Mohrenschildt had an interest in pursuing oil exploration contracts with Haitian President Francois Papa Doc de Villiers, something that may have involved George H.W. Bush's one-time alibi that he was in Port-au-Prince on November 22nd, 1963. This is crazy. I was reading some of this, but my goodness. In March 1977, the House Assassinations Committee was due to interview de Mohrenschildt, but just a few hours before his scheduled appearance, he was found dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Isn't that unbelievable? This happened to a lot of people. When Mohrenschildt's personal address was discovered, it was found to contain the following entry: Bush, George H.W. Poppy, 1412 W, Ohio. Also Zapata Petroleum Midland number. Wow. This is crazy. Absolutely crazy. From the directory entry, it appeared that Mohrenschildt, who was rumored to be with the CIA, knew George H.W. Now, at the time, I think he was the CIA agent. Oh, he might not have been. Because at that point, I guess, at that point, he might have been out of the CIA. He might have been the ambassador of China at that point, I think. Could be wrong. Knew George H.W. Bush, or Poppy, as his family calls him, from before 1959 when Bush moved from Midland to Houston. It is also noteworthy that while he was taking care of the Oswalds during 1962, that Mohrenschildt was in close contact with Admiral Henry Burton, the former director of Naval Communications, who would have played an important supporting role for naval intelligence activities in the Bay of Pigs invasion. Wow. Shortly before the House Select Committee on Assassination started meeting in the late 70s, a new doctor appeared in Mohrenschildt's town. Mohrenschildt started seeing him and quickly became mentally unstable. His wife convinced him to stop seeing the doctor. The doctor then moved away and left a false forwarding address. Might have been drugging him. The very day the committee tried to contact him about testifying, he was found dead of a gunshot wound. His personal address book was found and it contained the entry Bush H.W. Bush, Poppy, 1412 W, Ohio. also Zapata Petroleum Midland. Bush's full name is George Herbert Walker Bush, which matches the initials given in his earlier oil company was named Zapata Petroleum Corp. Jean de Morschelt rejected the finding of suicide in her husband's death. He was eliminated before he got to that committee. Wow. The widow told a journalist in 1978 because someone did not want him to get to it. She also, if you think about it, this guy is already he'd been the CIA director. If he'd done something and he knew that the Bush was there, he doesn't want this getting out. She also maintained that her husband had been surreptitiously injected with mind-altering drugs. One of the last people to see him alive was Edward J. Epstein, who was also interviewing him about the Kennedy assassination for an upcoming book. Epstein is one of the writers in the Kennedy assassination who enjoyed excellent relations with the late James J. Angleton of the CIA. Angleton was identified by the CIA's Robert T. Crowley as one of the major plotters in the Kennedy assassination before his death. Wow. These are names I've not heard of. According to Mark Lane, there was evidence that de Morschelt served as a CIA control officer who directed Oswald's actions. We knew that there was a guy that was a control on him. This was probably the guy. And if he knew Bush, that's a problem. Much of the extensive published literature on de Morschelt converges on the idea that he was a babysitter, handler, case officer, or control agent for Oswald on behalf of some intelligence agency. De Morschelt's pedigree evokes haunting parallels to the typical figures of the Paramidex networks of George A. Mandel, Ferenc Nagy, Max Hagerman, Max Siegelman, Colonel D'Amelio, Louis Mortimer Bloomfeld, and Clay Shaw. Clay Shaw, Guy Bannister. Okay, same guy. A newly discovered FBI document, and this is from 20 years ago. This article I'm reading you is from 2005, just so you know. A newly discovered FBI document reveals that George Bush was directly involved in the 1963 murder of President John F. Kennedy. Wow. The document places Bush working with the now famous CIA agent Felix Rodriguez, recruiting right-wing Cuban exiles for the invasion of Cuba. Now, that was the assertion of the movie, that they were pissed off about the Bay of Pigs, amongst many things. We know that this thing with the mafia was involved too. And we'll cover that too here. It was Bush's CIA job to organize the Cuban community in Miami for the invasion. The Cubans were trained as marksmen by the CIA. Bush at that time lived in Texas. Hopping from Houston to Miami weekly, Bush spent 1960 and 1961 recruiting Cubans in Miami for the invasion. That is how he met Felix Rodriguez. Now, of course, you know that Bush was an airman. He was a pilot in World War II. So this is kind of his connection to the deep state. You may remember Rodriguez as the Iran-Contra CIA agent. This is crazy. Who received the first phone call telling the world the CIA plane flown by Gene Hasselfuss had crashed in Nicaragua. As soon as Rodriguez heard that the plane crashed, he called his longtime CIA supervisor, George Bush. Bush denied being in the Contra loop, but investigators recently obtained copies of Oliver North's diary, which documents Bush's role as a CIA supervisor of the Contra supply network. Now, I would mention that one of the reasons Trump did not release all the files in 2017, 2018, because he said some people were still alive. Now, I would mention, if you are still alive, but you committed a murder, why are you protecting them? If he was involved in this, why are you protecting this guy? I don't care if he was president. Killed somebody. In 1988, Bush told Congress he knew nothing about the illegal supply flights until 1997. Yet North's diary shows Bush at the first planning meeting, August 6, 1985. Bush's official law placed him somewhere else. Such double sets of logs are intended to hide Bush's real role in the CIA to provide him with plausible deniability. It's also believed that he was behind the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, and he was the one that was controlling the information that they were gathering on John Hinckley, and he closed the file, and that files are closed, classified. I hope President Trump releases that too. The whole he could have shaped the what's that line from the Winter Soldier? Robert Redford tells us the Winter Soldier that he shaped the century. Could say that George H.W. Bush did. The problem is it fell apart because too many people like North and Rodriguez have kept records that show Bush's CIA role back to the 1961 invasion of Cuba. And the source here is the Washington Post from August 10th, 1990. So we got references and sources here. This is really interesting. That is exactly how evidence was uncovered, replacing George Bush, working with Felix Rodriguez when JFK was killed. A memo from FBI head J. Edgar Hoover was found, stating that Mr. George W. Bush of the CIA had been briefed on November 23rd, 1963, about the reaction of anti-Castro Cuban exiles in Miami to the assassination of President Kennedy. It says the source, the Nation, 8/13/8, but it doesn't give the last part of the year. On the day of the assassination, Bush was in Texas, but he denies knowing exactly where he was. That's shaky. Everybody knew where they were that were alive that time, since he had been the supervisor for the secret Cuban teams headed by former Cuban police officer, commander, Felix Rodriguez since 1960. Bush was also in Dallas in 1963. Several of the Cubans he was supervising as dirty tricks teams for Nixon were photographed in the Zapruder film. Oh my God. It's all CIA. Holy shit. In 1959, Rodriguez was the top cop in the Cuban government under Batista. When Batista was overthrown and fled to Miami, Rodriguez went with him, along with Frank Sturgis and Rafael Quintero. Officially, Rodriguez didn't join the CIA until 1967, after the CIA invasion of Cuba, in which he participated in the assassination of JFK. But records recently uncovered show he actually joined the CIA in 1961, with the invasion of Cuba, when he was recruited by George Bush. That's how Rodriguez claims he became a close personal friend of Bush. Oh boy. Then, officially, Rodriguez claims he quit the CIA in 1976, just after he was sent to prison for his role in the Watergate burglary. See, here's one. However, according to Rolling Stone reports, Cohn and Monks, Rodriguez still goes to CIA headquarters monthly to receive assignments and have his blue 1987 bulletproof Cadillac serviced. Rodriguez was asked by the Rolling Stone reporter where he was the day JFK was shot and claims he can't remember. Same thing Bush said. So he was one of the guys involved with wait a minute. Let me read this again. So he was involved with the thing with the Iran Contra. This is crazy, man. Involved with Watergate. Involved with JFK. Jesus Christ, this is really bad. The CIA put Texas millionaire and CIA agent George Bush in charge of recruiting Cuban exiles into the CIA's invasion army. Bush was working with another Texas oil man, Jack Crichton, to help him with the invasion. A fellow Texan, Air Force General Charles Cable, was asked to coordinate the air cover for the invasion. Cable was, of course, fired by President John F. Kennedy over his role in the management of the Bay of Pigs invasion. The mayor of Dallas in 1963 was none other than Cabell's brother, Mayor Earl Cabell. Oh my God. And Dallas. What the hell, man? This is bad. I'm just reading an article from 20 years ago. I would mention the future FBI director, Kash Patel, has seen all this stuff. He says all this stuff is out there. There's nothing new in the records. But I think a lot of it, all the nastiness comes from all the people that get eliminated, that get murdered. That's the one thing about government. They have to account for who goes where and what they're doing. And that's really what it comes down to. Most of the CIA leadership around the invasion of Cuba seems to have been people from Texas. A whole Texan branch of the CIA is based in the oil business. If we trace Bush's background in the Texas oil business, we discover his two partners in the oil barge leasing business, Texan Robert Mosbacher and Texan James A. Baker. Is that the same James Baker that worked for him? That was the Secretary of State and worked for Reagan? On the Watergate tapes, June 23rd, 1972, referred to in the media as the smoking gun conversation, Nixon and his chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, discussed how to stop the FBI investigation of the CIA Watergate burglary. They were worried that the investigation would expose their connection to the Bay of Pigs thing. Haldeman, in his book, The Ends of Power, reveals that Nixon always used code words when talking about the 63 murder of JFK. Hanneman said Nixon would always refer to the assassination as the Bay of Pigs. Interesting. Again, if you didn't know, Tucker Carlson had said a few years ago on Fox that Richard Nixon was wanted information on JFK, and that's why he got railroaded, and that he was an innocent man. And when it came to Watergate, I do know one thing: if Watergate had happened with Trump as president, Trump would have fought that to the bitter end. He would not have resigned. That's for damn sure. George H.W. Bush was apparently high enough in the CIA to not only help plan the Bay of Pigs invasion, even the operation and its two ships. Gerald Ford, one of the cover-up point men on the discredited Warren Commission, made as his CIA director none other than George H.W. Bush following Nixon's resignation. So there's this sort of quid pro quo of all this stuff. This is just absolute insanity. So we see this sort of connection between former President George H.W. Bush and the Kennedys, or one Kennedy anyway. My goodness. What his role in this is beyond me. It seems very murky. But they said in 2017, 2018, there was somebody that was still alive that was involved with it. He was still alive. He died at the end of 2018. George H.W. Bush. This is scary stuff, and it's important to know the truth about history, because you just can't let a murder take place, and you can't let a murder of a president take place, a duly elected president take place, and this has a domino effect on everything that's come to this point, okay? Because this whole thing seems to have been very coordinated now. Apparently, the word is, and what I heard, this was a few weeks ago, with this tape that came out between Billy Saul Estes and I forget the name of the head of the DNC at the time, who was the head of the DNC at the time under Lyndon Johnson and President Kennedy, that they had did a tape in 1971 talking about Malcolm Wallace was a hitman for the Dallas Mafia, and he was the personal hitman for Lyndon Johnson. And he hired Mac Wallace to kill the president. I believe, from what I've read, things I've seen, I'm going to go do more stuff, that there were at least 3 shooters on there. Now, Paulina Luna, who's, I guess, the Florida congresswoman, said there were at least 2 shooters. I think there were 3. If not a 4th one, but at least 2. One in the Texas Book Depository, which was Mac Wallace, because the Dallas police had found a partial print of him in the sniper's nest, and apparently he was there, so he's placed there. Why that evidence didn't get shown is beyond me. That was known. That's come out now. I believe there was somebody in the grassy knoll. I think it was somebody that worked for the mafia, the Chicago mob. We'll cover the Chicago mob here, because obviously they were pissed off about them at the Kennedys deporting some Italian gangster They hired somebody from Italy to come in, killed the president, and then left that very same day. And I believe there was another shooter by the bridge. That was always the rumor too. There was a third shooter on the bridge, under the bridge. So he was shot, and it was like a shooting gallery, pretty much. He was not getting out of there alive, and obviously it's done in Dallas, it's done in Texas, it's done in Lyndon Johnson's backyard. The Texas Book Depository, owned by his biggest donor in Texas and in the country. Read the article. He cut the frame out, the window pane, and put it in his living room as a trophy. Also, the FBI and Robert Kennedy were investigating Lyndon Johnson. They were going to drop him from the ticket because they were going to indict him for crimes of corruption and for murder, I guess. There was a lot of connections to the Dallas Mafia, a lot of connections to the Chicago Mafia, and the Arkansas Mafia as well. And the Arkansas Mafia is very interesting. The Chicago Mafia is very interesting too. What I understand is that the father of Hillary Clinton was a lawyer for the mafia in Chicago. And isn't it strange that she gets gets to be part of the Watergate investigation, and she's so corrupt they fired her. How corrupt can you be if you get fired from that? And we'll talk about General Ford's role, how he falsified evidence, saying that one of the bullets went through Kennedy's neck, went through the side of his back. That's the magic bullet theory. He's the one that changed the evidence, why he did that. And he's on the Warren Commission. He becomes president, not duly elected. Not duly elected, by the way. Very interesting connections to all this stuff. It's very interesting, fascinating to me. I don't know about you, but I find it very interesting and fascinating to cover all this stuff. And so glad this is all going to come out. So we got another month of this to wait. I'll have more stuff on this. I'm going to look up some stuff after this live stream. But hopefully you enjoyed it. I like doing this. So whether this channel gets monetized, that's all right. And we'll have more stuff. We'll go through Robert Kennedy. We'll go through Martin Luther King, which I don't know much about. Biggest thing I know is that James Earl Ray got out of the country. Somebody got him out of the country. I always thought the Klan was involved. I always thought that the government was involved with him. And I guess we'll talk about the 9/11. They're going to talk about 9/11. I know that the Congress wants to do that. I don't know if President Trump's going to do that. But hopefully we'll see some of that come out. And the Epstein file. So, thank you for watching this live stream. We're back in the near future. We'll have a video tomorrow. We'll have a live stream tomorrow. We'll see. I got to find some stuff to talk about. And have a good night. And I'll see you later.